Asta was moments away from finally making his grand return to the Clover Kingdom, but just as the witches and Finral were about to cast a spell to finally bring him home, Damnatio showed up ready to cast down judgment on all of them. And while any paladin showing up here would be a problem for the witches and Black Bulls, Damnatio being the one sent to deal with them is the absolute worst case scenario. Because his scale magic allows him to regulate the magic power of his enemies to the point where he essentially negates it completely, meaning that as long as he's around, he can steal the mana from the witches, keeping them from being able to complete the spell. And based on what we saw in chapter 281, when he helped Julius fight against the ancient demon, he can also transfer the stolen magic power into himself and others, meaning he's just going to be making himself stronger the longer the fight goes on. Now, there are limits to what his skill magic can do. For example, back in chapter 219, he wasn't able to completely erase Rogue, only making her to about the size of a newborn kitten, so her reality manipulating ability should still be somewhat helpful in keeping him alive. And in chapter 281, when he tried to use his scale magic to negate the ancient demon's attack, he was only able to make it a bit smaller due to his magic power being much greater than his, so anyone who dwarfs him in magic power are essentially safe from his main ability. Although, that being said, all the weaknesses I mentioned were pre him becoming a paladin, which means we shouldn't expect the exact same results. Now that his abilities have been boosted by Lucius, his scale regulate might be strong enough to completely erase Rogue, and while the Witch Queen almost certainly had greater magic than him before, they might be more equal now that he's a paladin. But all of this is obviously just speculation on my part. Until we see the fight actually start, we won't have any real sense of exactly how Rogue will be affected by his magic, or if he'll be able to negate the power of the Witch Queen. What we do know, however, is that the two people best suited to taking him on are Dorothy and the Witch Queen, but the two of them, Vanessa, Finral, and all the witches in the forest are needed to complete the portal for Asta, meaning that the Black Bulls are really the only line of defense they have, and while this was the normal Damnatio, I would argue that Luck would be able to take him on, as he is now strong enough to take down multiple mid-tier devils alone, but Paladin Damnatio is a whole other story. Because, like I already mentioned, we still don't know exactly what Paladin Damnatio was able to do. Was his magic power just boosted like Heath, or was he given the powers of a devil like Sister Lily? We don't know yet, and we probably won't find out until the next chapter. But either way, with his scale magic alone is already going to be an uphill battle for the Black Bulls, but they do have a trump card in this exact situation that will make things a bit more even. Because Henry and Gordon's combo spell, Curse Worker's Neighbor, allows him to choose who Henry steals mana from, so every bit of mana Damnatio steals from them, Henry can steal right back. But he can't disperse it to his allies, so they'll still be fighting at a slight disadvantage, but with so many heavy hitters on their side like Charmy, Knock, and Luck, they actually have pretty good odds in this fight. Though admittedly, I do hope it comes down to both Dorothy and the Witch Queen fighting against Damnatio themselves, because we've seen so little of these two in action that I'm actually craving to see them get a win. And speaking of characters needing a win, Kaiser could certainly use one. Seeing the chapter basically open up with him being punched into a wall just made me really feel bad for the guy. Ever since his introduction, he's essentially been the series' punching bag, taking loss after loss in each fight he's been in. In fact, the only times he actually wasn't completely trashed in a fight was when the outpossessing him fought for Goyon, and when the captains fought in the anime. And the fact that his only somewhat successful showings were when his body was being controlled, which he still ended up losing that fight, and in an anime-only fight really makes me wonder what Tabata has against this character. I mean, even Sekke, the purely comic relief character in Black Clover, has had more successful showings than him, and he's the guy who his own captain didn't even know he was part of the squad. But I have to admit, Sekke probably had my favorite moment in the entire chapter, because after seeing Asta refuse to give up no matter how hopeless the fight against Lucifer was, he was inspired to work hard to get stronger as well. Just the fact that we saw him offering to fight alone against a horde of angels while civilians escaped behind him goes to show just how much he's grown over the past year since the Spade War. And him getting back up ready to keep on fighting after taking a hit from the angels with almost the exact same damage and look as Asta in chapter 321 gave me a newfound respect for the character. And it has me thinking that Tabata might actually have something in store for him in this arc. I don't think he'll end up taking down anyone major like a paladin, but we could see him put a lot of effort in and end up defeating at least one or a few angels. Or at the very least, I think the very first person Asta will meet when joining the fight will be Sekke. Other things worth mentioning from this chapter, we get to see Mimosa doing her job of healing the wounded Magic Knights while helping Marks encourage the civilians, and I know this part of the chapter probably triggered a small section of the fandom, but something she said actually made me realize that things are actually going much better for the Magic Knights than I originally thought. Because she points out that while we are seeing the Magic Knights be heavily injured and in some cases killed off, none of the civilians have sustained any serious injuries, meaning that the Magic Knights are actually doing a pretty good job of keeping them safe. And once the civilians have all been evacuated, they'll be able to move their focus from protecting others to simply going on the offensive. Now, of course, they're still going to have countless clones of Lucius to contend with on top of the Paladins, and there's nothing really the everyday Magic Knight can do against them, but we should see a quick decline in the amount of angels on the battlefield, which would also free up some of the more powerful good guys like Fugoyan to help out against bigger threats, and also giving time for the smaller characters like Sekke to have their shining moments. And we'll go over what I think Tabata has in store for them in another video.